Good evening, and thank you for joining me for another Boring Books for Bedtime. I hope tonight's selection provides all the boredom your busy brain needs to quiet down and let you get some sleep. Before we begin, I'd like to give a special shout out of thanks to two new members of our Patreon family, Terry and Alexa. Thank you both so much for supporting this podcast. By becoming members of Patreon, you help us remain 100% listener supported and ad-free for everyone, and it's very much appreciated. And because you supported us in the month of December, you and everyone else who is a member of Patreon or drops us a one-time tip, no subscription required, via buymeacoffee.com will be entered into our special holiday raffle at the end of the month, which has a number of wonderful prizes. I'll be posting about those prizes on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee in the coming week, so if you'd like to check those out, you'll find links to Patreon and buymeacoffee.com in the show description. I hope you'll take a moment to check them out. Now, let's read and relax. Find a comfortable spot. Adjust your volume. Take a nice deep breath in. Let it out slowly. And off we go. Tonight, let's relax with a little how-to from a select collection of valuable and curious arts and interesting experiments, which are well explained and warranted genuine, and may be performed easily, safely, and at little expense, by Rufus Porter. First published in 1826 by Rufus Porter, Concord, New Hampshire. Let's begin. District of New Hampshire, to wit, District Clerk's Office. Be it remembered that on the 22nd day of October, A.D. 1825, and in the 50th year of the independence of the United States of America, Rufus Porter of the said district has deposited in this office the title of a book, the right whereof he claims as proprietor, in the words following, to wit, a select collection of valuable and curious arts and interesting experiments, which are well explained and warranted genuine, and may be performed easily, safely, and at little expense. In conformity to the Act of the Congress of the United States, entitled An Act for the Encouragement of Learning by securing the copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors and proprietors of such copies during the time therein mentioned, and also to an act entitled An Act Supplementary to an Act entitled An Act for the Encouragement of Learning by securing the copies of maps, charts, and books to the authors and proprietors of such copies during the times therein mentioned, and extending the benefits thereof to the arts of designing, engraving, and etching historical and other prints. Samuel Cushman, Clerk of the District of New Hampshire. A true copy of record, attest Samuel Cushman, Clerk. Advertisement. It is not so much the object of the author, with regard to the various arts treated of in the following pages, to convey to professed artists a more accurate and extensive knowledge of those arts, as to explain some of the first lines and principles of them for the advantage of those who may be induced to practice them occasionally, either for profit or amusement. The chemical experiments are such as are calculated to combine recreation with improvement in useful knowledge. A knowledge of some of the leading principles of chemistry, The true chemical terms according to the new nomenclature, which perhaps may not be so readily understood by some as the more common and familiar names, but will be found sufficiently explained in the appendix, have in this work been applied to the various articles occasionally mentioned. Very few substances have been mentioned which are generally considered poisonous or otherwise dangerous, but it may be proper, however, for those who may attempt any of the chemical experiments to proceed with caution and carefully avoid the fumes produced by chemical action, especially in metallic solutions in nitric acid and sublimation of mercury. Several articles in this little collection will probably be found to contain some improvements, and if it prove as interesting to others as a similar work would formerly have been to the author, his object will have been attained. Curious Arts 1. Waterproof gilding and silvering. This kind of gilding, usually termed oil gilding, being the cheapest and most durable, is in general use for gilding or silvering letters on signs, labels, etc., and may be performed as follows. Grind 1 ounce of white lead and 2 ounces of litharge, very fine, in a gill of old linseed oil, and if convenient, add nearly 1/4 of a gill of old copal varnish, and half an ounce of stone yellow, but neither of these last are very essential ingredients. Expose this composition to the rays of the sun for a week or more in a broad open vessel, observing, however, to keep it free from dust. Then pour off the finest part and dilute it with as much spirits of turpentine as will make it work freely with a brush or camel hair pencil. Oil that will answer exceedingly well for this purpose may sometimes be collected from the top of oil paints that have been long standing, and may be used directly without being exposed to the sun as directed above. Whatever letters or figures you would gild must be first drawn or painted with this sizing, the ground having been previously painted and varnished, and when the sizing is so dry as to be hard, but yet remains slightly adhesive or sticky, lay on gold or silver leaves smoothly over the whole, pressing them down gently with a soft ball of cotton. The most convenient manner of performing this is to lay the leaves of gold or silver first on a piece of deerskin or glove leather and cut them into pieces of a convenient size by drawing a smooth, not sharp-edged knife over them. Then take a small block of wood of a triangular form, about 1/2 inch thick and 2 inches in diameter, and bind a strip of fine flannel round the edges. Breathe on this and press it gently on a piece of the leaf, which by this may be taken from the leather and carried to any part of the sizing where it will best fit, and to which it will readily adhere. Thus the sizing may be readily covered with the leaf, very little of which will be wasted. Afterward, the whole may be brushed over lightly with cotton or a soft brush, and the superfluous gold or silver will be brushed off, leaving the letters or figures entire. When the work has thus remained 2 or 3 days, it may be rubbed with a piece of silk, which will increase its metallic luster. Note: it is very essential that the varnish of the ground should be thoroughly dry, that it may not be adhesive in the least degree. Otherwise, the leaf will stick where it should not and materially injure the work. When plain gilding is required for vanes, balls, etc., the leaves of gold or silver may be applied to the work directly from the book without cutting or dividing them. 2. The art of burnish gilding. Make a sizing by boiling the skins of beaver and muskrats, which may be readily procured at a hat manufactory. Boil in water till it is of sufficient strength that by cooling it will become a stiff jelly. Strain the liquor while warm and give your work one coat of it with a brush. When this is dry, add a little fine whiting to the sizing and give the work one coat of this. Then add as much whiting as will work freely under the brush and lay on 5 or 6 coats of this, allowing each a sufficient time to dry. Smooth the work by wetting it and rubbing it with a piece of pumice stone, which should be previously cut and fitted to the molding or other work that is to be gilt. Afterward, when the work is dry, rub it with some fine sandpaper. Then take some burnish gold size, which is composed of pipe clay, plumbago, beef tallow, and castile soap, but may be easily procured ready-made, and dilute it with water till it is of the consistency of very soft putty, and afterward with the above-mentioned sizing till it will flow freely from a brush, and give the work 3 successive coats of this. When the last is dry, dip a camel hair pencil in a mixture of equal quantities of rum and water, and with it wet a small part of the work, and immediately while it is flowing lay on a leaf of gold, brushing it down with a very soft, flat, camel hair brush, with which also the leaf is usually conveyed from the book to the sizing. Proceed thus till the whole is gilt and let it dry. When the work is sufficiently dry to take a fair polish by burnishing, which can be only ascertained by applying the burnisher to different parts of the work occasionally, while it is drying, rub over the whole carefully with a flint burnisher, or with the tooth of a wolf or dog, being fixed in a convenient handle, till the whole acquires a brilliant polish, except such parts as are required to remain in a rough gilt state, which parts are usually flatted by a coat of thin sizing. Such are the principal rules of the art of burnish gilding, but as this business requires some variation of management, according to the state of the weather and other circumstances, it may not be expected that any person should become very expert in the art without the advantage of some experience and practice. 3. Ornamental bronze gilding. This is performed by means of gold or silver reduced to an impalpable powder called bronze. One method of preparing it is to leviate any quantity of gold or silver leaves on a stone with some clarified honey. Dilute the honey with clear water that the bronze may settle. Pour off the water and honey, and add fresh water to the bronze, which, after being thus thoroughly washed, may be dried on paper and is ready for use. Another method of preparing the gold bronze is to precipitate the gold from its solution in nitromuriatic acid by adding sulfate of iron to the solution, then washing it as directed above. But in general, it will be found much cheaper to buy the bronze ready prepared. The ground for this work must be varnished with a mixture of copal varnish with an equal quantity of old linseed oil, and whatever figures are to be formed in bronzing must be represented by holes cut through pieces of paper. Lay these patterns on the work when the varnish is so dry as to be but slightly adhesive, but not press them down any more than is requisite to keep the paper in its place. Then take a piece of soft glove leather, moisten it a little by breathing on it, and dip it in some dry bronze, and apply it to the figures beginning at the edges. Tap the figure gently with the leather, and the bronze will stick to the varnish according to the pattern. Thus any figure may be produced in a variety of shades by applying the bronze more freely to some parts of the work than to others. If some internal parts of the figures require to be more distinct than others, they may be wrought by their peculiar patterns, or may be edged with dark-colored paint. In some work, it may be well to extend the varnish no farther than the intended figures, in which case any projecting or branching parts of the figures may be drawn with a camel hair pencil, and the patterns may in some measure be dispensed with. In either case, the work must afterwards have one or more coats of copal or shellac varnish. 4. To enamel picture glasses with gold. The glass must first be washed perfectly clean and dried. Then damp it by breathing on it, or wet it with the tongue, and immediately lay on a leaf of gold, and brush it down smooth. When this is dry, draw any letters or flowers on the gold with Brunswick blacking, and when dry, the superfluous gold may be brushed off with cotton, leaving the figures entire. Afterward, the whole may be covered with blacking, or painted in any color, while the gold figures will appear to advantage on the opposite side of the glass. This work may be elegantly shaded by scratching through the gold with a small steel instrument, in the end of which many sharp points are formed previous to laying on the blacking. Oil paints of any kind may be substituted in the place of the blacking, but will not dry so quick. 5. To wash iron or steel with gold. Mix together in a phial 1 part of nitric acid with 2 parts of muriatic acid, and add as much fine gold as the acid will dissolve. For this purpose, gold leaf is the most convenient, as it will be the most readily dissolved. This solution is called the nitromuriate of gold. Pour over this solution cautiously about half as much sulfuric ether. Shake the mixture and then allow it to settle. The ether will take the gold from the acid and will separate itself from it also and form the upper stratum in the phial. Carefully pour off this auriferous ether into another phial and cork it close. Wash any piece of steel or iron with this ether and immediately plunge it into cold water, and it will have acquired a coat of pure gold. With this also, any flowers or letters may be drawn or written, even with a pen, and will appear perfectly gilt. The steel or iron should afterward be heated as much as it will bear without changing color, and if the steel be previously polished, the beauty of the gilding may be much increased by burnishing with a cornelian or bloodstone. 6. To wash brass or copper with silver. To half an ounce of nitric acid in a phial, add 1 ounce of water and 1/4 of an ounce of good silver. It will soon be dissolved, and if the acid and metal are both pure, the solution, which is called nitrate of silver, will be transparent and colorless. Add to this a solution of nearly 2 drams of muriate of soda in any quantity of water. This will precipitate the silver in a white, opaque mass. Pour off the water with the acid and add to the silver an equal quantity of supertartrate of potash, thus forming a soft paste. Dip a piece of soft leather in this paste and rub it on the metal to be silvered. Continue rubbing it till it is nearly dry, then wash it with water, and polish by rubbing it hard with a piece of dry leather. Another method is to add subcarbonate of potash to the nitrate of silver, as long as ebullition ensues. Then the acid is poured off, and the precipitate, which is white at first but becomes green when dry, is mixed with double its quantity of muriate of soda and supertartrate of potash. With this composition being moistened, the metal is rubbed over, etc. 7. To give wood a gold, silver, or copper luster. Grind about 2 ounces of white beach sand in a gill of water, in which half an ounce of gum arabic has been dissolved, and brush over the work with it. When this is dry, the work may be rubbed over with a piece of gold, silver, or copper, and will, in a measure, assume their respective colors and brilliancy. This work may be polished by a flint burnisher, but should not be varnished. 8. To print gold leathers on Morocco leather. First wet the Morocco with the whites of eggs. When this is dry, rub the work over with a little olive oil and lay on gold leaves. Then take some common printing types and heat them to the temperature of boiling water and impress the letters on the gold. Rub the whole with a piece of flannel, and the superfluous gold will come off, leaving the letters handsomely gilt. Another method is to strew powdered rosin over the Morocco previous to laying on the leaf. The heat of the types melts the rosin, which occasions the gold to adhere to the impressions, while the other may be brushed off. 9. To dye silk a brilliant gold color. Take any quantity of nitromuriate of gold, see number 5, and evaporate by exposing it to a gentle heat in a glass tumbler or phial. The gold will form itself in crystals on the bottom and sides of the vessel. Collect these crystals and dissolve them in 10 times their weight of pure water. Then put a gill of water into a common flask and add 1 ounce of granulated zinc and 1/4 of an ounce of sulfuric acid. Hydrogen gas will be evolved and rise through the neck of the flask, which must not be stopped. Immerse a piece of white silk in the above-mentioned aqueous solution of gold and expose it while wet to the current of gas as it rises from the flask. The gold will soon be revived, and the silk will become beautifully and permanently gilt. Any letters or flowers may be drawn on the silk with a camel hair pencil dipped in the solution, and on being exposed to the action of the gas, will be revived and shine with metallic brilliancy. Note: the silk must be kept moist with water till the gold is revived. Zinc may be prepared for the above purpose by melting it and stirring it continually with a stick or iron rod while it is cooling. or it may be pulverized with a hammer as soon as it becomes solid. 10. To dye silk a brilliant silver color. Proceed as directed in the last experiment. Only use the nitrate of silver, C6, instead of nitromuriate of gold. The process of crystallizing, redissolving, etc. is the same, but the crystals of silver differ in color, being white, whereas those produced from gold are yellow. If a jar or box be filled with hydrogen gas and the silk suspended in it, the action of the gas and consequently the revivification of the metals will be more uniform. For small figures, however, it may be as well to fix a stopper in the flask, having a small orifice through it, that the gas may be thrown with some force on the silk and will have a more certain effect. A solution of muriate of tin may be managed in a similar manner, but none of these solutions can be thus revived on paper. 11. To silver looking glasses. Lay on a smooth board a piece of soft deerskin leather, rather larger than the glass that is to be silvered, and on the leather, having sprinkled a little fine whiting, spread a piece of tin foil of the same size. Pour on a few drops of mercury, and brush it over the tin with a smooth brush, till every part of the tin becomes bright. Then add as much mercury as will lay on the tin, and upon this lay the glass to be silvered. On the glass lay another piece of leather of the same size, and on that another board. Take up the boards with the glass, and pressing the boards together, turn them with the glass the other side up. Take off the upper board, and pass the glass with the tin and leather between two rollers, similar to those of a rolling press for copperplate printing, thus to press out the mercury from between the tin and the glass. Then place the glass between the boards again as before, and place a heavy weight, which cannot be too heavy unless it breaks the glass, on the upper board, which must remain 2 or 3 days. The glass may then be taken up. The practice of some is to lay thin paper on the mercury previous to laying on the glass, this paper being carefully drawn out after the glass is laid on, serves to remove the superfluous mercury, that the tin may come more nearly in contact with the glass. In this case, no rollers are used. Concave or other fancy glasses may be silvered by making an impression with the glass in a kind of putty made of fine sulfate of lime and water, and placing the glass in the impression again with the tin foil and mercury when the plaster is dry, and subjecting it to pressure 2 or 3 days in that situation. The experiment of silvering glass may be performed by rubbing a drop of mercury on a small piece of tin foil and pressing it upon a piece of glass with the finger or a piece of soft leather. In this case, the glass will have acquired the reflective property of a mirror, and if a similar pressure be continued a few hours, the tin will adhere permanently. 12. To write on paper with gold or silver. Make a sizing as strong as will flow freely from the pen by dissolving equal quantities of gum arabic and loaf sugar in water. Write with this on paper and let it dry. Then moisten the paper by breathing on it, or by holding it over hot water, and immediately lay pieces of gold or silver leaf on the lines of the writing, pressing them down gently with a dry hair pencil. Otherwise, brush gold or silver bronze lightly over the writing, but this will not have so brilliant an appearance. Allow the sizing to dry again, and then brush off the redundant gold or silver with cotton. This writing, if performed with leaf gold or silver, may be burnished with a flint burnisher or a cornelian or bloodstone. Gold letters may also be written or drawn with a hair pencil by means of gold bronze mixed with weak gum water, to which may be added a little solution of soap, which will make it run more freely. But no preparation of solution of gold has yet been discovered which may be easily revived on paper. 13. To make good, shining black ink. Take 2 ounces of nut galls in coarse powder, 1 ounce of logwood in thin chips, 1 ounce of sulfate of iron, 3/4 of an ounce of gum arabic, 1/4 of an ounce of sulfate of copper, and 1/4 of an ounce of loaf sugar. Boil the galls and logwood together in 3 pints of water till the quantity is reduced to 1/2. Then the liquor must be strained through a flannel into a proper vessel, and the remainder of the ingredients be added to it. The mixture is then to be frequently stirred till the whole is dissolved, after which it must be left at rest for 24 hours. The ink may then be decanted from the gross sediment and must be preserved in a glass bottle well corked. 14. Blue ink. Dissolve 1 ounce of gum arabic in a pint of water. In a part of this gum water, grind a small quantity of best Prussian blue. You may thus bring it to any depth of color you choose. Indigo will answer this purpose very well, but is not so fine a color, nor will it remain suspended so uniformly in the water. 15. Red ink. In the above-mentioned gum water, grind very fine 3 parts of vermilion with 1 of lake or carmine. This is a very perfect color, but may require to be shaken up occasionally. To make the common red ink, such as is used by bookbinders for ruling, etc., infuse 1/2 pound of rasped Brazil wood for 2 or 3 days in a pint of vinegar. Then filter or strain it, and add 1 ounce of gum arabic and 1 ounce of alum. It may afterward be diluted occasionally with water. 16. Yellow ink. Steep 1 ounce of turmeric in powder in 1/2 gill of alcohol. Let it rest 24 hours, and then add an equal quantity of water. Throw the whole on a cloth and express the colored liquor, which mix with gum water. Rum or other spirits may be substituted in the place of alcohol. A solution of gamboge in water writes a full yellow, but comes far short of turmeric in brightness. 17. Green ink. To the tincture of turmeric, prepared as above, add a little Prussian blue. A variety of tints may be formed by varying the proportions of these 2 ingredients, and no artificial color can excel it in beauty. 18. Purple ink. To the blue ink described at 14, add some finely ground lake, or instead of this, The expressed juice of the deepest colored beets may be substituted, but is more liable to fade. With either of these, a variety of tints may be formed by varying the proportions. 19. To write in various colors with the same pen, ink, and paper. Take a sheet of white paper and wet some parts of it with a solution of subcarbonate of potash, which must be diluted with water so as not to appear on the paper when dry. Wet some other parts with diluted muriatic acid or with juice of lemons. Some other parts may be wet with a dilute solution of alum, and others with an infusion of nut galls, water in which bruised or pulverized nut galls have been steeped. None of these preparations must be so strong as to color the paper any. When these are dry, take some finely powdered sulfate of iron and rub it lightly on some parts of the paper that have been wet with the subcarbonate of potash and infusion of galls. Then with the juice of violets or of the leaves of red cabbage, write on the paper as usual with a pen. The ink is of itself a faint purple. Where the paper was wet with acid, the writing will be bright red. On the subcarbonate of potash, it will take a beautiful green. On the alum, it will be brown. And on the subcarbonate of potash that was rubbed with powdered sulfate of iron, it will be deep yellow. And on the infusion of galls that was rubbed with the powder, it will be black. The juice of violets will sometimes take a brilliant yellow on the alkali if it be very strong. The juice of violets or red cabbage may be kept a long time by means of the addition of a few drops of alcohol, or the leaves may be dried by the fire, and thus may be kept ready for use, and it is only requisite to steep them in hot water in order to prepare the ink at any time. Note: the yellow ink described at 16 writes a full red where the paper has been wet with the solution of subcarbonate of potash, while the solution of sulfate of iron, which has no color of itself, writes a deep yellow on the alkali and black on the infusion of galls. 20. Sympathetic inks for secret correspondence. Process 1. Dissolve muriate of ammonia in water and write. The writing will be invisible. When you would make the writing appear, heat the paper by the fire, and the writing will become black. 21. Process 2. Write with a solution of sulfate of iron. The writing will be invisible. Dip a feather in an infusion of nut galls, and with it wet the paper, and the writing will become black. 22. Process 3. Write with a dilute infusion of galls. It will be invisible. Dip a feather in a solution of sulfate of iron, and moisten the paper with it, and the writing will become black. 23. Process 4. Write with a solution of subcarbonate of potash. Wet this writing with a solution of sulfate of iron. It will take a deep yellow color. 24. Process 5. Write with a solution of sulfate of copper. No writing will be visible. Wash the paper with a solution of prussiate of potash. The writing will then get a reddish-brown color. 25. Process 6. Write with a solution of supercarbonate of soda. Moisten the paper with a solution of sulfate of copper, and the writing will become green. 26. Process 7. Write with diluted nitrate of silver and let the writing dry in the dark. It will be invisible, but expose the paper to the rays of the sun and the writing will become black. 27. Luminous ink that will shine in the dark. To half an ounce of essential oil of cinnamon in a phial, add half a dram of phosphorus. Cork the phial slightly and set it or suspend it near a fire, where the heat may be nearly equal to boiling. Continue the heat 4 or 5 hours, shaking the phial frequently, but cautiously, lest any of the oil should escape or come in contact with atmospheric air, in which case it would take fire. The cork should be set sufficiently tight to exclude atmospheric air, but not so as to prevent the escape of any vapor that might be produced by excess of heat. The phial may be afterward removed from the fire and suffered to cool. With this phosphorized oil, any letters may be written on paper, and if carried into a dark room, will appear very bright, resembling fire. The phial should be kept corked close, except when used. 28. To make a writing appear and disappear at pleasure. Dissolve equal parts of sulfate of copper and muriate of ammonia in water and write. When you would make the writing appear, warm the paper gently by the fire. The writing will appear in a yellow color, but as soon as you take the paper into the cold air, the writing will vanish. This may be often repeated. 29. To make a writing vanish and another appear in its place. Write on paper with a solution of subcarbonate of potash. The writing will be invisible. Mix together equal parts of solution of sulfate of iron and infusion of galls. Write with this mixture, which is black, on the same paper. Then add to the black liquor a little sulfuric acid, sufficient to deprive it of color. Wet the paper with this compound. The acid will discharge the color from the last writing, while the alkali of the first will precipitate the gallate of iron, and the writing will become black. 30. To restore old writing that is nearly defaced. Boil 1 ounce of powdered nut galls for an hour or more in a pint of white wine. Filter the liquor, and when cold, wet the paper with it, or pass it on the lines with a camel hair pencil, and the writing will be much revived. 31. To paint a picture that will appear and disappear occasionally. To half an ounce of nitric acid, add 1 dram of cobalt, 1 dram of muriate of soda, and 2 ounces of water. Set it in a sand bath or on warm ashes, where it must remain 5 or 6 hours. Then filter the solution, which is nitromuriate of cobalt, and with it draw the trees and shrubbery of a designed picture. Then with a solution of oxide of cobalt in acetic acid, draw some distant mountains, fences, etc., and with muriate of copper, the compound solution described at 28, draw some flowers, buildings, etc. These will all be invisible when dry, but warm the paper and the picture will appear in green, blue, and yellow. It will disappear again when the paper becomes cold. 32. Landscape painting on walls of rooms. Dissolve half a pound of glue in a gallon of water and with this sizing, mix whatever colors may be required for the work. Strike a line round the room nearly breast high. This is called the horizon line. Paint the walls from the top to within 6 inches of the horizon line with sky blue, composed of refined whiting and indigo or slip blue, and at the same time paint the space from the horizon line to the blue with horizon red, whiting colored a little with orange lead and yellow ochre. And while the two colors are wet, incorporate them partially with a brush. Rising clouds may be represented by striking the horizon red color upon the blue before it is dry with a large brush. Change some sky blue about 2 shades with slip blue and paint your design for rivers, lakes, or the ocean. Change some sky blue 1 shade with forest green, slip blue, and chrome yellow, and paint the most distant mountains and highlands. Shade them while wet with blue, and heighten them with white, observing always to heighten the side that is toward the principal light of the room. The upper surface of the ocean must be painted as high as the horizon line, and the distant highlands must rise from 10 to 20 inches above it. Paint the highlands, islands, etc. of the second distance, which should appear from 4 to 6 miles distant, with mountain green, 2 parts sky blue with 1 of forest green. Heighten them while wet with sulfur yellow, 3 parts whiting with 1 of chrome yellow, and shade with blue black, slip blue, and lamp black equal. Paint the lands of the first distance, such as should appear within a mile or 2, with forest green. Heighten with chrome yellow and shade with black, occasionally incorporating red ochre, French green, or whiting. The nearest part or foreground, however, should be painted very bold with yellow ochre, stone brown, red and yellow ochres and lamp black equal, and black. Paint the shores and rocks of the first distance with stone brown. Heighten with horizon red, shade with black. For those of the second distance, each color must be mixed with sky blue. The woodlands, hedges, and trees of the second distance are formed by striking a small, flat, stiff brush endwise, which operation is called bushing, and is applied to the heightening and shading of all trees and shrubbery of any distance, with mountain green, deepened a little with slip blue, with which also the groundwork for trees of the first distance is painted, and with this color the water may be shaded a little under the capes and islands, thus representing the reflection of the land in the water. Trees of the first distance are heightened with sulfur yellow or French green, and shaded with blue black. Every object must be painted larger or smaller according to the distance at which it is represented. Thus the proper height of trees in the second distance is from 1 to 2 inches, and other objects in proportion. Those in the first distance from 6 to 10 inches generally, but those in the foreground, which are nearest, are frequently painted as large as the walls will admit. The colors also for distant objects, houses, ships, etc., must be varied, being mixed with more or less sky blue according to the distance of the object. By these means the view will apparently recede from the eye and will have a very striking effect. And with that, I think we'll end this evening's reading, from a select collection of valuable and curious arts and interesting experiments, which were certainly curious and varied indeed. I'm not sure how many of those would actually kill a person, but I'm not really willing to find out, and I highly recommend you don't either. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed that. If you'd like to read this fascinating collection for yourself, as always, you'll find a link to a free ebook from Project Gutenberg in the show description. If you'd like to connect, suggest a boring book you'd like to hear read, or request more from one we've already started, you can drop me an email via our website, www.boringbookspod.com. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining me for this evening's reading. Until our next boring book, good night.